On today's mailbag episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast, we're going to talk a lot about Ty France and Eugenio Suárez because that's what most of the questions are about. What went wrong for them in 2023? Who's most likely to bounce back in 2024? And what if Suárez gets traded? Well, a report from MLB.com said as much. Are the Mariners actually out on signing Shohei Ohtani? Colby and I will answer all that and more coming up. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, November 20th, 2023. This is Trident as also Colby Bannoed for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, and right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's LOCKDON to get yourself started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. It is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions, and we're going to start here with Daisy in the Dingo. Daisy wants to know, was there anything you saw from Ty or Gino this year that led them to regress, like a certain way pitchers were pitching to them, or anything within their underlying data? Colby?
Yeah, you mean aside from them just sucking, is there anything that points to them regressing? Yeah, there actually are. Particularly with Ty, a couple things stand out. First of all, never trust somebody named Ty. Second of all, he started chasing a lot more, and the chases were worse than they were before, because not all chases are created equal, right? If you swing at a pitch that's an inch outside the strike zone, you can still do damage with that pitch. If you swing at a pitch that's in the other batter's box, as we saw France do multiple times, all you do there is make yourself look like an idiot. And that's what France did. And France has always been a guy who will expand the zone. He will chase, but typically he's chasing pitches that he can handle, he can get to. And so it's not that big of a deal. Last year, his chase rate was 33.3%. So 1 out of every 3 balls that were thrown to him, he swung at. The big key here, though, is that his chase contact percentage dropped 6%. That's a massive number in a year. So the fact that his chases went up by about 1.5%, but his swing and misses on pitches outside the zone went, down by 6%, tells you that he was chasing worse, not just more than he was the year before. Another thing, when you look at the pitch data here, in 2022, Ty France obliterated breaking balls, curveballs, sliders. In 2022, he hit 297 against those pitches with a 518 slug. This last year, he hit 239, so about 60-point drop, and he slugged 351, 130% drop in slug. So curveballs gave him trouble. He wasn't that good against fastballs either. He only hit 248 against them with a 373 slug. That's about a 40-point drop from 2022 and about a 50-point drop in slug from 2022. So curveballs really gave him issues this year in 2023, and they didn't really last year. So
right.
It's to me, when I look at Ty France, I say it's pretty clear he's chasing worse pitches, and he's also chasing more pitches,
right?
Which is, not giving himself a good shot to go out and get hits. So why that happened, I don't know. I think that he tried to hit for more power this season. He wanted to be a 25, 30 home run guy, and it just doesn't work for Ty France. He just doesn't have the bat speed really right now to generate that kind of power. So we'll see what he can change this offseason, but it was bad. He's got to be able to hit the breaking ball. He's got to be able to hit the fastball. And he's got to be better with his chases. If he's going to expand the zone, he has to do it within reason. He can't be out there swinging at sliders a foot out of the strike zone and expect to have success. So that was the problem with Ty France.
As for Gino,
Gino, little bit of bad luck with Gino goes into play here. Certainly, I think we all remember 5, 6, 7 fly balls that he hit that died at the warning track that were home runs last year. That could be a bat speed issue. If he's not generating that bat speed like he was, then fewer balls are going to leave the ballpark. So that could be something. I'm not sure where to get bat speed data, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'm not sure.
It's True Media, which only a select few people have access to.
Right.
That's where most of the batted ball data or the bat speed data is. So,
right. I mean, you look at like his StatCast page, he still barreled up the baseball plenty. 87th percentile in barrel percentage, 69th percentile in average exit velo, 85th percentile in sweet spot percentage, 80th percentile in chase. He walked plenty. He swung and missed too much. At the end of the day, and that sounds like well, no kidding, but it's the truth.
I think part of the issue too with Gino is it's just kind of a volume thing because he played so much. So when we're looking at strikeouts from a pure counting perspective, he was bottom 3 in the league, but from a percentage perspective, he actually, slightly reduced both his K rate and whiff rate from 2022. Like both categories are still bad. Don't get me wrong, but like the point is he's been able to produce at a high level in spite of those marks. That's pretty much a testament to what we've been saying this offseason, that, you can strike out 28 to 33% of the time or whatever, as long as you're making up for it in other areas. The problem for me really it was that he was hitting the ball with authority less frequently and wasn't getting to his barrel as much. Like teams didn't really attack him any differently than they have in the past. He just didn't execute, and he didn't take advantage of mistakes as frequently as he needs to.
Yeah. You look at the numbers, just the raw numbers. Batting average only dropped by 4 points over last year. Slugging or on base only dropped by 9 points over last year. Yeah, it's the slugging that did him in. 60 point drop in slug. And Gino has to hit home runs. Like he has to be 25 to 30 home runs. He has to be that guy. And if he was with the glove and he slugged 430 this year, he's probably a 4-win player still. But yeah, Gino's felt a lot more like bad luck mixed in with some regression, whereas Ty's was much more about bad process.
Ty, I just like I looked at the zone charts on Savant for France, and like the only thing that I really saw was like teams reduced how much they tried to nibble the outside corners with him. They instead started going up and in and down and in on him a bit more. But like I said, the overall approach from pitchers didn't really seem to have changed much outside of that. Like you mentioned, he just whiffed more, especially in the sweet spots of the strike zone, like upper middle and upper inside third of the zone. Like for example, if you look at his zone charts on Baseball Savant, go to baseballsavant.com. If you just go on the on a player's profile and you click zones, you can see all the stuff that we're looking at. His upper middle misses jumped from 11 in 2022 to 19 in 2023, which like that doesn't sound like a lot, but those are 8 additional potential hard hit balls just left out there. I think it really boils down to a couple things for him: that his lack of bat speed catching up to him, and teams taking more advantage of that due to his struggles to quickly turn on pitches inside, and then obviously, like you talked about, some uncharacteristic tendencies, like really, really chasing and bad chases. We're talking about not just your average chases, but really, really awful swing decisions, those just haven't really been part of his game until this past year. And I think he just started pressing, and by virtue, guessing more once things really started to unravel for him. So he's got a lot of work ahead of him, but I think it's mostly pitch identification, more of a mental thing for France, because like physically speaking, I don't think that he's going to, like, we're magically going to see Ty France come back and all of a sudden he's got a whole new setup and he's added like 3 to 4 miles per hour on his bat speed and all this. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, but we've been able to see him succeed in spite of those things and in spite of his flaws, make it work. He just needs to make better swing decisions.
Yep.
So we'll see. And we have a question about, which of these two players are most likely to bounce back in 2024. So we're going to answer that and more in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and a whole lot more. And yeah, the Mariners might not be playing right now, but the Kraken and Seahawks are. So whether the action is on turf or on the ice, you can bet on it all with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKEDON, and kick off the NFL season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. And as a reminder, folks, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a quick programming note for you guys in terms of tomorrow. I've already talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to be out tomorrow. So the plan is no show unless the Mariners do something. If the Mariners do something, we'll do a show that night, kind of like we did on Friday with the Luis Urias deal. So just so you know, and I think the plan is to actually do a show on Thanksgiving. So you guys are going to get a Thanksgiving show. I love Thanksgiving. All right, let's get back into these questions. Jake wants to know, assuming both are on the roster for 2024, who do you think is most likely to bounce back next year, Ty France or a Eugenio Suárez? I think for all the reasons that we laid out during the first segment, it's Gino. I also think that Gino just naturally has the higher ceiling of France. He plays a more important position. He's going to hit, 25 to 30 home runs if everything hits for him, if not more than that. And I think he's closer just in general. I think he's working from a better foundation coming off of this past year than France is, relative to both of their situations. That is right.
Sure. It's a little tough. It's a toss up for me because it feels like there's a pretty good chance that France's issues are mechanical and that he can make an adjustment and be okay. Whereas it's possible Gino is just a guy who's past his prime now and the cliff is starting to come and he's 32 years old and he's lost some bat speed and this is just who he is now. Like that's possible. Whereas I don't think that's the case for France, who's still technically in his prime. So yeah, it's kind of like, do I trust France more to make the mechanical adjustments he needs to, or do I trust Gino to, I don't know, not regress more? Right. It's a little bit weird because again, when you look at a lot of the underlying numbers, they would tell you that Gino, more or less the same guy he was last year, just got a little bit unlucky. And then obviously, didn't do enough damage on pitches he used to do damage on, but that could be a bat speed thing. And typically once bat speed starts to go, you don't really get it back. And that's a little concerning, especially for somebody who strikes out as much as Gino does. So if pressed, I'd have to say I'd probably give the edge to Ty, just because he's got age on his side. And again, I think it's just a mechanical. I think it's just an issue with, I think it was a bad attempt last year, a bad game plan by him last year. And now it's just about getting back to what you were. And maybe adding some bat speed and naturally adding some power like JP Crawford did. So I guess I'd probably take France, but I think it's a toss up because, it's pretty easy to write a script that says like France has to undergo surgery this offseason on his swing, and Suarez just kind of needs a Band-Aid. He just kind of needs to,
Right.
just
and
add
also
a little bat speed and he's there.
And getting more literal with it too. Health is also kind of plays a role into what I'm thinking here. And I know it sounds weird to give the slight edge in terms of health to the older guy, but France hasn't been able to stay healthy, and some of that has been, not really his fault. Most of it hasn't really been his fault, but he does crowd the plate, and he's going to get hit by a lot of pitches. That's
a
just
lot of
going
wrist,
to happen.
elbow, shoulder issues for Ty France.
Yeah. So, that's just kind of part of it, right? That's just who Ty France is. And so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to stay healthy to have a consistent enough season to consider it, much of a bounce back. Whereas like with Gino, I get he's older and he's naturally, because of that, just historically speaking, when we look back on the history of athletes in general, more prone to injury than France is from that perspective. But he's proven capable of staying healthy over the last couple of years. He obviously played in every single game this past year. He shouldn't do that again. You guys know our feelings on that. But I think that should also kind of play a factor here when we're talking about this. I think it is a little bit of a toss up, but I would give it to Gino because I think there's just a bit more of a better foundation to work with here for Gino. Whereas again, like you said, France has to undergo surgery with his mechanics this winter, and that might take some time, and that might not be something that he adapts to, or at least easily adapts to. I think a lot of people see what Driveline was able to do for JP Crawford last offseason, and they go, well, that's just going to happen for Ty France and Josh Rojas and all these guys that are going to go to.
Ruined my bet.
Right. But
I was going to say, did you notice that we didn't mention Driveline once? No free ads.
Right. So, it's not a given, right? That he's going to go to Driveline and things are going to get fixed and that he's going to adapt to those things, right? Because it's ultimately up to him to adapt to those things, and adapt to those tweaks and execute them to their fullest. So, it's not a one size fits all type of thing for every single player. So we'll see. I just right now, if you ask me, who should I put money on to be better out of these two guys in 2024, I'm probably going Suarez, but it's close. It's close enough.
Yep.
Dom Canzone Enjoyer wants to know, would you rather see an upgrade at first base or third base? First base. Get more traditional power output out of first base.
Sure. What we're learning is Ty hates his fellow Ty brethren.
He's not even a Ty. He's a Tyler.
Whatever. Same thing.
He's a fraud.
He's
a fraud.
Same thing. So is Ty. By the way, if you notice the Dom Canzone Enjoyer, his was Drunk Scott. So it makes sense why makes sense why you would enjoy Dom Canzone, the guy who did literally nothing. But it's still like, oh my God, how do we get this guy at bats every single day in the lineup? You don't. You don't. That's how you do it. This is kind of a weird off season because there's really not upgrades available at either spot. I mean, not in free agency. But I guess first base, just by virtue of like, it's a little bit easier to fix that than it is. In theory, yeah. So I guess first base, but like, why not both? But the real answer is probably neither. The Mariners are going to roll it back with both of those guys because there's not really an obvious solution to either spot that makes more sense than just being like, hey, why don't we just assume that Ty France isn't terrible after 1 year, and let's not assume that Gino fell off a cliff when there's some legitimate numbers that suggest he was fine. He's just a little bit unlucky. So they're not going to do either, I don't think. But if I had to upgrade at one spot, I mean, upgrade assumes that you're going to get better, then I guess I'd say first base. But
ideally, like dream scenario, I get a young third baseman with multiple years of club control.
Great. Young. You get Jose Ramirez, Jose Ramirez.
Jose
Lamont
Ramirez
Wade
cool.
Jr.
Sure,
But Like, what's real here?
But like, yeah, if I could get like Isak Paredes, great, awesome, cool.
I mean,
But-
that could upgrade either spot
True.
in
true,
theory. So,
True. But yeah, I would rather have that than I don't know, name a first baseman. Like, but I would rather have, you know, Jose Ramirez, Isak Paredes, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, given what the market is, probably first base. Probably first base. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. Got a question here from Dan Smith. I am a little confused by the Daniel Kramer article regarding Shohei Ohtani. Given how tight-lipped the Mariners are, was there a specific front office mention they don't anticipate being serious contenders, or was it just based off their past spending history? Thanks for helping me understand this. Love the podcast. So I can't speak for Daniel Kramer or his sources. You know, I assume that he's talking to people within the organization, and at least some of what he wrote in his article is at least an indication that he got from his sources in terms of, you know, what the Mariners are thinking right now, that Ohtani is quote unquote not part of their realistic agenda for the offseason, which, you know, he probably isn't part of the realistic agenda for most Mariners fans. At least from the indication that I get from a lot of our listeners and a lot of people that I interact with on Twitter. You know, most people think that it's a pipe dream. Obviously, they really want Ohtani, but, you know, they think that's kind of a, you know, small percent chance, like we've maintained here on the show as well. I'll say this though, I think maybe the article is a bit overblown, and maybe parts of it that where Kramer is more so speculating rather than, you know, giving out concrete information that he's received. Those parts have maybe been a bit more overblown and treated more so just as straight up facts, because Brian Divish went on Ben Ranieri's show, the Sea Level podcast, a couple days ago, and he said essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase, that the Mariners issue is more so with the length of the contract and having to pay Ohtani as both a hitter and a pitcher in guaranteed dollars by like year 7, 8, 9, 10 in that deal, where they're still paying him $55-60 million a year. He said that they would feel comfortable giving him the AAV it would require, like $60 million, $55 million over more of like a 7-year contract with opt-outs after year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, etc. And that they think that Ohtani, and this is something that Colby and I have speculated for a while now on the show, that he values flexibility more over anything else and control over his career. And they don't think that he's going to take necessarily the highest value contract that is offered to him this offseason. That's what the Mariners are essentially banking on. So the Mariners are, it sounds like from at least what Divish is saying, the Mariners are preparing, or they have offered a very creative deal to Ohtani, one that essentially they think gives them a leg up over other teams, or at least they're hoping gives them a leg up over other teams, and they'll see if he wants to take it. But they're not going to essentially do whatever it takes, quote unquote, and by whatever it takes, meaning like, yeah, man, here's $600 million for the next 10 years. Like, here, yeah, you can, like, even if you stop pitching after year 4 of the contract, we're still going to pay you as that guy who does both. We're still going to pay you as a two-way player in year 8 and year 9 and year 10. So, which
is honestly what you want if you're a Mariners fan. Like, you don't want to pay a guy for something he's not ever.
Right.
So while it may feel good to have Ohtani pitching year 1 through 4, when he stops pitching, you realize he goes from a, 8-9 win player to a 5-win player, and now you're paying the 5-win player $60 million a year. Like, he's probably still worth it. Don't get me wrong, but with limited budget space, because your owner, doesn't want to pay for Ohtani and run a regular payroll on top of having Ohtani on his roster, then yeah, I think, you got to be smart with it, and we'll see. I think what could very well be is that the Mariners have prepared, or they're getting ready to prepare this, unique offer, something we've never seen before in Major League Baseball. And the source is telling Kramer, like, but yeah, they're not willing to go $500 million. They're not willing to go $600 million. So they're out. And we don't know that, because we don't know what Ohtani actually wants. And we also need to keep in mind, Ohtani has apparently told teams that if you tell anybody that we're talking, I'm going to hold it against you. Like
Right.
he's valuing his privacy essentially in these negotiations very highly, and that makes sense from what we know about Ohtani.
Mhm.
So I don't think anybody knows as much as they think they know. I still don't think the Mariners are going to get him. Like
No.
I'd be shocked
Yeah.
if the Mariners got him. Happy but shocked. But I by the way, I saw some people accuse Kramer of clickbait. That's BS. Dude's doing his job.
Yeah.
People are interested in Ohtani updates. Of course they are. He's got a little bit of information, and he's using what the information that's available to him to try and update people on where the Mariners stand in their pursuit of Shohei Ohtani. It's his job. It's literally his job. So, yeah, I don't have any issue with what Kramer wrote. I honestly didn't read it because I don't care about, this, like, oh, here's what Ohtani's thinking on November 20th. And then tomorrow, here's what he's thinking. And then, oh, I saw him having lunch in LA again today. Does that mean he's re-signing with the Angels? I don't care about that. Talk to me when there's concrete fact about what's going on with Ohtani. Then I'll care. Otherwise, it's just speculation and only one source from a front office, not even the Mariners front office. We don't know. And obviously we'll never know. That's not enough for me to panic. That's not enough for me to freak out. And honestly, there's pretty much nothing that's going to cause me to freak out over Ohtani not signing here because I never expected it in the first place. So I'm chilling. Kramer did his job. But doing your job with limited information requires you to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit. And that's just where we are in the off season. Not a lot has happened, although it's starting to pick up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Divish is just as clued in as Kramer, if not more so. And again, I mean, they both could be right. Like they legitimately could. Like Ohtani is going to listen to the Mariners pitch, but maybe he really does want the $500 million up front. We don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But no, neither Divish's comments or Kramer's article really moved the needle for me at all. I'm just like, yeah, that's about what I expected.
Speaking of Ohtani, we have a question here from Maddie F. Brown. Never seen this person before in my life. Asking,
how dare you?
When does Ohtani sign?
Not only did you bring your mistress onto the show,
right.
Now you have the gall to pretend like you don't even know who that is. Oh, I found this text on your phone. Oh, that must have been my buddy who texted his wife.
I don't know who that is.
How dare you, sir?
I have no idea who this Maddie F. Brown character is.
How dare you?
This is like an episode of Maury.
Never. So
no, I know what Colby's actual answer is. Ohtani will sign when Maddie admits that Cody Barton is mediocre.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the Colby answer.
And I didn't watch your podcast yesterday, or admit that Gino lost that game for Seattle and other players, but Gino too. Next question.
Right. Jace wants to know, what approximately would we get for Gino? Now, what package do you think we would opt to go for? Would it be similar to the Seawall deal?
I think they're listening on Gino.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to trade him because we've talked about this. How do you replace him? Now you could replace him with Rojas and Urias. That platoon, we talked about that idea on Friday night. Or I guess I would say, but you have to then go and replace second base. So
right.
It just doesn't make a lot. This is a terrible, terrible infield group. So if you trade Gino, then I guess if you get like Brandon Lowe or Lau, whatever, if you get him and you move your second base platoon to third base, then I guess you've made up the power difference. But it's just really hard to trade Gino because you don't have that replacement.
It's just not the market to do it unless you're getting insane value for Gino, and I'm talking about like an extra 50% on the dollar.
Like, might have been what you got in the Seawall trade. But like the Seawall trade, the issue is going to be that you're not going to go out and replace that player, or you're going to have a hard time going out and replacing that player.
And are you actually getting the immediate impact that makes it worth it Because for me, again, my main focus is 2024. So does trading Gino for whatever I can get for him, plus the headache of having to find some sort of replacement, unless that replacement is coming over via the deal, does that actually make me better in 2024? And there aren't many avenues that I see here. And, you know, look, Jerry and Justin love to get creative and they always find a way to surprise us, but most of the time. But I can't see an avenue here where that actually happens, where they actually get better in 2024 while simultaneously trading Gino because of what the market is. And the answer is not to go out and sign Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman is extraordinarily overrated.
He's basically Gino.
And he's apparently still asking for like $150 million. So I'm super out. I could not be more out on Matt Chapman.
You could cut the number in half and I'd still be out.
Yeah. Jameer Candelario, I like, but given the market, he's probably going to get overpaid relative to what he's actually worth.
He's not even a third baseman, really.
He's not even really a third baseman. So they're just like, all right, if you could platoon Rojas, if instead of the second base platoon being Rojas and Urias, it becomes the third base platoon, you can do that and then go out and get Brandon Lau or Jeff McNeil or Jake Cronenworth. I mean, cool, but you're also but you're also taking a shot on Cronenworth actually turning it around. You're actually taking a shot on, you know, McNeil's injury not being that bad and that he's able to get back to the, you know, 120, 130 WRC plus guy that he's been in past years. You're still banking on a lot, and yeah, you're banking on a lot with Gino as well, but like, wouldn't it just be easier to just bank on Gino figuring it out for the next year rather than creating this massive headache for you and basically ending up in a relatively similar situation?
I mean, at that point, it depends on what you get back for Gino.
Right.
So
it's hypothetical on hypothetical on hypothetical. I get I'm like talking myself in circles here, but still.
Yeah, until you would see the whole puzzle piece, it's impossible to like grade a Gino Suarez trade because like, could they trade Gino and actually end up with a better roster?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it going to look that way in the you know, the minute they make that trade? Probably not.
Right.
So, you know, we'll see. I do. Apparently, a couple of the teams that have been sniffing around Gino, we know about Toronto. We know that they have interest there. I've heard the Dodgers, and which is, you know, kind of a little bit surprising, but whatever. I've also heard the Rays. Like, what? Like, how do the Rays have Curtis Mead, Austin Shin, Isak Paredes, and then who's the Candelario, right? Caminero, yes. Yeah. They have a lot of third basemen, no shortstops. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that one's just wrong, but
they saw the 2021 Reds run out Gino at shortstop, and they were like, "Yep, we want some of that.
Yeah, give me some of that." But yeah, so we'll see. There are teams that are interested, and it makes sense that they'd be interested. This is a bad market for corner infielders.
Yeah.
But that also works both ways because the Mariners are trying to compete. So it's a really tight fit. I did throw out a trade idea Saturday, and was pretty surprised by the response. I said, would you trade Gino for Jordan Romano of the Blue Jays? And at last check, it was like 55-45 yes, which again surprised me. Yeah, if you could do something like that, and then you go and you get Brandon Lau, and then like, okay, would you rather have Lau and Romano or Gino and prospects? You know, depending on which ones. You can make an argument that you got better, but it's a tough needle to thread, is what I would say.
Yeah. All right. Next question here from Peter. Were there any takeaways from the Aaron Nola deal, like his AAV, or the Aaron Bummer trade and its return that could impact or inform the Mariners' approach to pitching this winter?
No. Nola took a little bit of a discount by most accounts. But I think he got about what he would have, you know, on the open market anyway. So I really don't see that. And then the Bummer deal is pretty unique because it's a lot of bulk. It's a lot of names, like guys that we recognize on top prospect lists and guys who have performed a little bit at the big league level. But it's guys who are coming off of injuries. It's guys who have really struggled in the minors and they haven't lived up to their draft, their draft spot and all.
And at least a couple of guys that were probably getting non-tendered.
Right. So it looks like a lot of players, and it is. It's what was it, 5 for 1 or whatever?
Yeah.
But at least two of those guys, the Braves were going to non-tender anyway, so they throw them into that deal. It's a couple guys who are going to miss chunks of the season and miss a lot of last season anyway, so they throw them into it's a lot of bulk. So I don't think there's a lot there. For Seattle, like I don't think Seattle could have done that trade for Bummer.
Right.
But
I think really the only thing that might have an impact on the Mariners is the relief market, and the Braves have just been that entire market for the most part
Yeah.
here. They re-sign Jimenez and Pierce Johnson to relatively similar deals, similar structures, and then they signed Ronaldo Lopez today. They've spent a lot of money on their bullpen. But I feel like that's essentially set in the market for guys that we've talked about, like Robert Stevenson. So
Yep.
You're probably looking at $8 to $10 million AAV on guys like that in that range.
Just about what I'd expect. So
yeah.
The market hasn't blown me away. Like this doesn't like, oh my God, this is a player's market. Like not yet. It hasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it should finally confirm to everybody that Blake Snell's not coming here. Like
I think really the thing that we're all waiting for though is the first big shoe to drop, and that's just one of the hitters signing. And I think it's like, for me, it's more so one of the mid-tier hitters to see, like, are guys going to get overpaid relative to what the market is? Like, is Teo going to get like $18 million a year just because he just, like, even though that he's coming off a bad season, he's still probably like a top 5 hitter in the market?
Is Gurriel getting 4? Is Gurriel getting 4 and 50 or 6 and 90? Like,
Right.
what does he get? Like, is Soler getting 2 or 3 years at 15 million, or is he getting 3-4 years at 20 million? Like, what does that look like? Because Nola got about what I would expect him to get. Lopez got an extra year more than I thought he'd get, but whatever. He got the AAV.
Yeah.
So far, those are the two big signings. Lynn today got 10 million with some incentives. That sounds about right to me. So far it doesn't appear that the market is running wild, for the players, but I don't think there's
a weird bunch of players though that have signed so far. Like, we've got the one big name in Nola, and then it's just like, here's Lance Lynn, and here's Pierce Johnson, and here's like a couple other guys like Ronaldo Lopez. Like, it's just been all over the place. So
sure. So, but no, I don't think I think the Bummer deal is a very special circumstance. I actually like that deal quite a bit for Chicago and Atlanta, because it's literally Atlanta going, hey, here's some spare parts. Give us this lefty reliever who was really good last year, or 2 years ago, and really unlucky last year, but also has some warts. But these are guys that we don't want on our 40-man anyways, taking them. Like the definition of a bulk deal. And Chicago gets a couple of guys who could, in theory, help them at the majors this year.
Yeah,
and have
Jared
some club
Schuster,
control.
Mike Soroka, like they just needed bodies for that rotation, really, and they got a couple.
Yeah, and a couple guys that they could flip at the deadline if they need to or want to. So yeah, I just think that deal's a special circumstance. With Nola re-signing, he reportedly took less. I'm not sure if I buy that, because it looked like it was about what I'd expected anyway. So no, I don't think the market's told us anything. Really, because the prices are about what I thought they would be. So for me, no. It tells me that the pitching market isn't going to get out of hand, and we don't know what the market on bats is going to do until a couple of them sign.
Right. All right. Last question. We are going to answer this very quickly because we are well over time. Ryan wants to know, do you think the lower budget teams like the Rays value Miller more than Logan due to his club control and salary, or is the gap in talent too great? I think the talent disparity is still great, because with Miller, there's still a lot to dream on. There's a lot of good stuff to dream on, don't get me wrong, but there's still a lot to dream on. And I think his ceiling, production wise, right, not really stylistically, but production wise, is essentially Logan Gilbert.
Yep.
And you're talking about a 2-year club control difference?
Yeah.
3 year?
Yeah.
3 year? 2 year?
Logan has 4. Miller still has all 6.
Yeah.
I don't think the Rays would much rather have Gilbert than Miller, because Gilbert doesn't even get that expensive for the next 2-3 years. Like, he's a super 2. He's going to make 4.5 to 5 million this year. Next year he's probably making 8-9, and it's only the year after that, when he still has 2 years of club control, that he's going to start making, 10-15 million dollars. At which point the Rays can still get a haul by trading Logan Gilbert with 2 years left of club control.
Right.
So in this particular case, they're definitely going to value Logan Gilbert. If Logan Gilbert had 2 years of club control left, maybe things change. If he was making real money, maybe things change. But the Rays have shown that they're willing to spend some money. They're not, the Oakland A's, and Gilbert's
They're
not
still like bottom 5 in the league, but like there's a big gap between them and the A's.
Sure. I mean, they paid Glass now like $40 million for 2 years. Now they're trying to trade the last year of that, but you get the point. Like, they're not non-tendering guys because they're going to make 1.5,
Right.
So, they would still value Gilbert because he's not making real money for at least another 2 years. And then at that point, if you don't want to pay Gilbert, you can just flip him for massive return right back. So they're still going to value Gilbert over Miller.
Yeah, agreed. All right, that's going to do it for our show. Again, no show tomorrow unless the Mariners do something. Then we'll do a show tomorrow night, and that'll get out to you probably, I don't know, around 9 or 10 Pacific time. So keep an eye out for that if the Mariners do something. But for now, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.